Yeah, I see some familiar faces from the last Live Zero talk. So this is exactly the same talk. So if you have better things to do, I recommend you to go and do something better and listen to me repeat myself again. Okay, so it is what it is. So all good. So okay, I'm going to talk about scaling red team operations today. And does this work? Oh. Okay, it doesn't work. It's okay. Let's go. Oh, that's why. Is it why? Oh yes, okay. So, okay, and it still didn't work. Oh, perfect. All right. So as introduced, I'm a principal red team consultant at Mandiant. I specialize in delivering and leading red team services for my company. So I'm also a CREST assessor where I'm involved in supporting the development of exams and also the invigilation of exams. At this point, I would like to take a moment to thank CREST for inviting me to come here and share my ideas. And with that said, I'll just do a quick introduction of CREST. CREST is an international not-for-profit membership body representing the cybersecurity industry. It aspires to be the heart of the global cybersecurity industry by connecting different parts of the industry together. Whether you are a member company, whether you are part of the buying community, or you are an individual professional looking to qualify your skill set, CREST is here to support you. And with that said, that's enough of corporate shenanigans, and let's move on. Okay, disclaimer, Mandiant and presenter do not support or endorse any activities conducted by criminals. Information presented is solely intended for raising awareness. Content shared is solely presenter's opinion and does not reflect Mandiant or any organizations affiliated with presenter. So the background of these talks came from the Cybersecurity Code of Practices version 2, where it requires critical information infrastructure owners, also known as CIO, to perform red teaming or purple teaming attack simulations to fulfill the requirements. So some of the organizations have talked to me and they were exploring the option of building their own internal red team and developing the right capabilities to fulfill these requirements. But the question is, how do you go about doing that? So I intend to address this question from a perspective of people, process, and technology. And before I go into how Mandiant does this, do that, I really wanted to take a step back and look at how threat actors in the industry are building their own teams. I mean, behind every cybersecurity attack, behind every malware, there is always someone. There's no like some crazy AI taking over the world. It's always someone behind an attack. It can be someone, it can be an organization, which is more likely in these days and age. So it's something like I want to investigate, like how do they actually do it? I mean, we always talk about cybersecurity talent shortages, but the headline of companies getting breached is just ever increasing. So where are they getting this talent, man? I mean, amidst all this like shortage of talent. So that's some question that I also seek to understand. So with that said, before I go further, I just want to take time out and really thank the security researcher behind who actually went through all this data leak of these threat actors, read through all the mind-numbing chat logs in Russia and translating into English and then providing the key takeaways that we enjoy today. So these are the links that or references that I actually took. So first of all, Conti ransomware group. They are a ransomware as a service group where they develop and maintain their ransomware platform that enables its affiliates to easily deploy ransomware on their victims. So how they monetize this whole thing is when their affiliates deploy their ransomware and their victim pay the ransom to get back their data, they get a cut of it. They publicly emerged in the mid of 2020 and ceased operation around mid-2022 after the data leak. And I use the word cease very loosely because it's really hard to physically prosecute them. It takes years of investigation and so on and so forth. And even then, normally it's not like complete. So most of them, what they do when they get too notorious, they either disband, rebrand it under a different name, or they join a different group. and they continue their operations. So when they were active, they were aggressive and successful. As of January 2022, the FBI estimated that they had more than 1,000 victims, and the victim payout actually exceeded USD 150 millions. So they were very successful as a business. I mean, how many business in Singapore SME actually get 150 million revenue? So it's not a small sum. And they were so successful that the Department of State offer USD $10 million for information on the ransomware group. So based on the data leak and all the chat logs in their Rocket chat, the security researcher came out with like this org chart of them. Some of you might think org chart is very like boring, you know, what's the point? But to me, as someone who's interested in how teams are being built, this really shows insight in terms of how do they prioritize their resource, allocate the resource, and what kind of operations they focus on to keep things going, to keep the money coming in, right? So at 30th July 2022, they had 87 salary employee. That is quite a sizable team for a red team. Yeah, you can see that they are just focused on like attacking corporations. And what's interesting is on the left of this org chart, right, you can see that they have the standard corporate services. They have the HR, who is in charge of recruiting and attracting talents to their group. And for the blogger or negotiator, you can think of this as more like a marketing function. Like they write blogs about their victim to pressure the victim into paying up, because there's like a publicly known thing that, oh, you have been breached, then what are you going to do? And a lot of eyes will be on you. Next, you have the training, which is also commonly known as the L&D in the typical corporate environment, where they are in charge in getting people up to speed and being operationable. And lastly, if you look at blockchain, this is your typical innovation function within your company. They are interested in finding new ways to do things. For example, they are looking at blockchain or cryptocurrency to use that as a form of payment from their chat logs. And on the right, you can see the teams of operational teams. So they have very specific roles and responsibility. And you can see this gives you insight into like how they divide the roles and responsibility. First, you have the developers who are in charge of developing and maintaining the ransomware platform and ransomware. Then next, you have the offensive team. The offensive team is more like your red teamer, your pen tester, the hands-on keyboard that try to breach and also try to expand the access when they are in the network. Next, you have the OSIM and negotiation specialist. This is a bit different. The OSIM here used is a bit different from the OSIM in the technical sense, whereby we talk about open source intelligence, looking at your parameter assets and whatnot. No, they are not interested in all that stuff. They are interested in looking at your company profile to know who to contact, what is your company revenue, the size, the industry you operate in, so that they can set a reasonable amount of the ransom for you to pay up. So the ransom is not like a fixed price thing. It's something that is based on a company, and they want to give you something that is realistically you will be willing to pay instead of like just outright no. Next, they have the system administrator who are involved in spinning up infrastructure and maintaining infrastructure that use to conduct their attack operations. Then the AV testers is probably one of the most boring jobs, which is to run their newly built ransomware on a system installed with AV to test whether it works. And lastly, they also have reverse engineer, where they reverse engineer their competitors' ransomware to see what kind of features they have and implement it within themselves. There's also some mention in terms of they also reverse engine like the latest patch so that they can uncover the vulnerability and develop exploit for their operations. So how do they recruit? They recruit via underground forums, legitimate job portals also. Also, they pay access to legitimate job portal database so that they can just download all the resume and quickly scan through them so that they can shortlist interesting candidates directly. Of course, they also have the employee referral program, whereby it's by word of mouth. So this is a post from the group on an underground forum known as XSS. On the left is the Russian post. On the right is a translated version. So the job description is actually very succinct. So what they mentioned was understanding of the structure of Active Directory, Windows administration experience, understanding the foundation of routing, understanding the work of network protocol, knowledge of any programming language, knowledge of pen tests. Yeah, so it's very succinct compared to most of job portal I look on LinkedIn. They need you like know 10,000 things and 10,000 certs. So they are actually quite nice. I would actually consider applying to them if I'm a fresh grad because it looks quite friendly. It's not so like elitist or stringent. And also the condition looks pretty okay, depending where you come from. They offer you a timely salary of 1,500 USD. Definitely doesn't work for Singapore, but in some part of the world, this might be a lot of money. The work is completely remote. Wow, work-life balance. 5 days a week, Saturday, Sunday, weekend, and paid holidays. In addition, they are in the condition, there are permanent growth. For every success, you get a permanent increase plus instant bonus. So yeah, so it looks like they are pretty succinct with their job description compared to the typical security consultant or role that I see on LinkedIn. And next, if that post is not enough, they had a follow-up. Recruitment of pen tester continues. Whether you are a professional or beginner, it doesn't matter. We have individual approach to everyone. We will teach and help. We need guys who want to progress in long-term cooperation. How inspiring. I mean, if I look at this, I might just apply to them. Instead of some recruiter who just ghosts you, right? Don't reply, you apply, never reply. Oh, then maybe 6 months later they reply and you're still maybe looking for a job. I don't know. Depends how it goes. And once you are being hired, they have a very comprehensive like onboarding process whereby they provide you a training manual that on the right you can see an example of that. So if you are a pen tester, there's a hacker quick guide that contains the list of recommended TTPs and approach. If you are a researcher, they'll provide you a quick start guide in terms of the obfuscation technique, process injection, and AV evasion techniques that you could use. If that's not enough, they also provide a lab environment and video tutorial to teach you how to do the task step by step. One example could be build and encrypt a Cobalt Strike payload, run initial reconnaissance commands, and if you need soft skills, they also teach you how to document the access and the network information so that you can hand over to your colleagues. How nice. How many companies actually do training to this extent, right? And if that is not enough, they offer the best kind of training you can get. Live production access and actions. So they conduct live training on live victim network. They teach various penetration testing and intrusion technique and provide instruction and documentation and answer questions from the group. So on the right is kind of a summarized chat log in terms of how they were doing it. So there was a team lead, and then he will be leading the engagement, and then he will be probing his peers in terms of, oh, any questions, anything you want to know, and he will explain to them what he's doing and how they should go about doing things. So I thought their onboarding process is pretty impressive to say the least, right? To be to go that far. I mean, you definitely don't get that from Sense, even you pay $10,000 doing it on live production network. Definitely not. So in terms of the technology and tools that they use established malware such as Tripboard, Buzzer Loader, ICE ID for initial access. They use Cobalt Strike and publicly accessible tools for post-exploitation. But they develop their own ransomware, and I think there's a reason for that. Next, they subscribe to Crunchbase Pro and Zoom Info subscription for identifying victims' earning, estimates, and contact information. All those are good, but there's no mention of any task management and workflow tools such as Jira, Asana, or what to kind of track how things are going, right? They just mainly use Rocket Chat to coordinate the operations, which is not very effective, right? Okay. So next, in terms of the process, they rely a lot on purchasing initial access to victim from initial access broker. So if you look on the right, The top part indicates, if you can see, indicates the approaches that you need to take to secure initial access to a victim. You either do phishing, you do password spraying, password brute force to RDPs, you buy creds, you use exploit, all this good stuff, right? They are not interested. They just outsource that part of work to initial access broker. What they are interested in is once you gain access. Once they gain access, they want to escalate a privilege, perform lateral movement until they got enough access and they want to deploy the ransomware. So this is very important. This is very important that they recognize where the value chain is. So initial access doesn't really mean anything because what's the impact, right? But eventually, if you are able to escalate your privilege, you are able to access all the important system, and then ransomware, put your ransomware that you write, then you get the full value out of it. And you don't have to go through all the effort to coming out like phishing campaign, or go and try a lot of password spray, don't have to try to develop exploit. You can just focus on the most important part of the operations. And that is where the monetization is also. Next, they actually have a process of like manually testing the new malware built against modern AV solutions, and we test it every 4 hours. The reason why they retest it every 4 hours is because they believe the Microsoft signature updates every 4 hours. So they will build the malware and get this dude to run it on the system with like the AVs. And then if there's something wrong, then they will escalate and make the necessary changes. But I would say they are not very effective, not very efficient also, because you can definitely automate this with CI/CD pipeline. I don't get why you need a guy to do that. At least I won't do that. Yeah. Then they manage each operation using the Rocket Chat. They also research and develop for new technologies. For example, it was mentioned that they were looking into Windows 11 when it was in beta because they know that it's up and coming. So they want to be ready when it becomes mainstream. So you can see that they are also very forward-looking, that they want to be ahead of their competitor and what technologies their victim could possibly use. Besides that, they also mention in terms of they rely on resellers to procure legitimate EDR solutions so that they can test their ransomware against. I think this part is also very interesting because like some of the people I talk to, they assume that once they got EDR, they are safe, which to a certain extent, yes. But what makes you think that your adversary won't get their hands on it? And even if the vendor do their KYC, know your customer process properly, it doesn't stop the legitimate company reselling it to someone else. I mean, that's like all the terms and conditions, but do everyone follow that? Especially when the bad guys are using it, you think they care? Not really, right? So that's something to think about. So all in all, for Conti, sophistication is moderate at best due to the heavy reliance on publicly available tools and exploit. There were no reports of all-day exploit being used. The efficiency is low due to heavy reliance on manual processes and lack of workflow management and tracking tools. However, they are extremely effective. Their effectiveness is high due to the use of initial access broker, established malware, comprehensive training for new affiliates. They are well organized with dedicated roles and responsibility. This is the part that is very interesting, right? Even though they are not the most efficient, they are not the most sophisticated, but they are very effective in terms of getting their victim to pay up. In terms of money part, right? The money that come in so they can fund it into whatever else they are doing. They don't really have to be so efficient when they can just hire more people at $1,500 per month. So I guess that's one way. So this is the part where we also need to recognize like how they are actually evolving their operations using literally outsource those things that they don't think is very useful. Yeah. Next, I'm going to talk about FIN7. They emerged in 2013, targeting US retail, restaurants, and hospitality segments for payment card data. By 2018, they had stolen more than 20 million customer records. Three of them were arrested in 2018, but they still continue to operate and evolve even now. So this is a screenshot of their org chart by the ProDAF. This is from their report. So you can see, right, just a quick glance, you know that they are not as organized as Conti. They just have some bosses, some developers, some pen tester, and affiliates, which could be partner track groups and so on and so forth. And how do they go about recruitment? They set up fake companies to recruit employees to perform legitimate penetration testing. So on the right is the screenshot of their old website. It's down now. It looks pretty professional. And then they even have Crest. Even the bad guys recognize Crest. So that's always a laughing point for me. Yeah. And they are willing to train new hires and provide them the necessary tools to complete test assignments. And the test assignment consists of providing the candidates with real access to victim networks. Whee! Right? It's like the best fun part, right? Go production network and do your fun stuff. I think the interesting thing here, if you are applying to a certain security company and they just provide you access to something that looks like production network, like the domain name, the host name, it looks a bit weird, and without telling you anything, you probably want to stop. You might be part of their operation without knowing that. So because normally when you do testing, there's always communication between the client and you, so that you will see like, oh, you are actually authorized. So yeah, it's pretty interesting how they do that. Next, for technology part, they developed their own automated attack system known as the checkmarks. It has several modules. The three main modules are the exchange exploitation module, the SQL injection module, and the most interesting thing to me is the victim information enrichment module. They self-develop malware such as Carbonac and Lisa for initial access, and they also use CobraStrike for post-exploitation activities. But they use other ransomware groups, ransom for ransomware activities. So this is a screenshot of their attack system. So what they do is they take the module, they spray against the internet. So eventually they have a list of victims, compromised systems, and then it's all in their system. So it looks like a lot of stuff, right? So then it's very important to think, once you have so many access, right, how do you prioritize? How do you proceed? How do you know which system that you want to go, put more resource into attacking them and getting more access? Because all these are trade-off. You do not have, I will assume they do not have infinite resource technically, but yeah, so it's a spot for choice, right? Next, same thing, they have the SQL injection module where they will spray against the internet and basically have a list of victims where they were successful and they have to follow up on. And this is where the third module comes in. The top module basically go query at all the kind of websites or services that provide you information on the company, which they will then consolidate on their portal. This is amazing, because it really helps to prioritize which victim you should go after. I mean, if you have all the system under, imagine you are SolarWinds, you have all the system under your control, who should you go after first? That's a very interesting problem, by the way. So they have like a CRM system where they will then put comments about their victim in terms of like, how reliable is the access, and also the company information, production of piano and musical instrument in Japan, 3 billion revenue, 20,000 employee. So this is very important because there's no point going after small SME because they are less likely to be able to pay because their business is just not so big. So this approach is known as the big game hunting, where they are really going after big companies, which then they can set a higher ransom target based on a percentage of their revenue. And in terms of their C2, this is Carbonac. It is their C2 framework. It looks like definitely a summer intern project. The UI looks horrendous. Not gonna sugarcoat this, but I think it's very beyond the UI. I think it's very important to recognize that this is a full-flag C2. It has numerous very useful functions such as like capturing the video of the screen. They have like SOX proxy, running commands, adding users, tunneling, all the good stuff that typical CobraStrike C2 would have also. So this is actually quite useful if you are using it. So if one C2 framework is not enough, they have another one known as Lisa. So I guess the Carbonac got quite a bit of attention, so they have to develop another one to kind of evade the standard kind of signature that the EDR vendors or AV vendors are creating, or maybe they just got sick of the UI, right? They just want something new. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. So in terms of the processors, some of the notable stuff is they purchase stolen credentials from underground forum and check it with their in-house developed tools. And this is aligned with the exchange exploit module because it requires a valid credential to do the post-auth exploitation. They conduct feasibility study on their vulnerable targets. And another interesting thing to know is they do leave behind backdoors on target system, so that after you got ransom ready, right? You pay the ransom. You think, oh, you know, life is good, we're back to normal. And they'll come back again and run a different ransomware on your system so you can pay again to them. So I think it's very important that even if you choose to pay the ransom for whatever reasons that you decided, it's extremely important to make sure you engage a proper like DFIR company to come in and do a in-depth sweep to make sure that all their access are gone. If not, if they have a chance, they will definitely come back and go for a second round, man. Why not? I mean, easy money. Don't have to pay the initial access broker again to get initial access. And they also keep a lookout in terms of reports about them. I mean, all the vendors out there, TI, you know, they like to write about what they find, right? It's part of the marketing ploy. And they monitor themselves too. They want to find out like if there's any mistake they make, so that they can improve their tradecraft, their tools, and make the changes so that they don't get detected again the next time, at least not easily. And so they'll evolve their TTPs and tools after being caught. All in all, their sophistication is moderate to high due to the heavy investment in their tooling. The efficiency is high. As you can see, they automate a lot of stuff. They have a proper system to manage their victim. However, their effectiveness is only moderate to high. Even though they use initial access broker, they use customized malware, victim prioritization, but they are still new to the ransomware scene. They are still kind of transiting from the old school like kind of card payment theft to ransomware, where I think they believe is a better monetization strategy for their kind of activities. So they are still trying to get a hang of it. And lastly, they are just not as organized as Conti in terms of like the org structure, as you can see. So moving forward, we'll be talking about building and scaling a legal red team. And in order to do that, I need to first clarify that what I'm talking about is not a typical offensive security team, whereby some of you might be doing VAPT, source code review, security configuration review, bug bounty, triage. I'm not interested in that. They're all good stuff, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about building a team that can effectively simulate real-world threat actors. So the difference between a red team and a threat actor is obvious. We do not have unlimited resource. Technically, that's their business, so they can afford to put more resources and time. Whereas for us, our client pay us for our time, so it's a like fixed rate. And we are often dictated, not often, always dictated by the rule engagement. We can only do phishing, password spray, exploitation of server that are approved by our client because their system, their rule. Whereby the threat actors, what they can do, they don't care, right? They can just target a vendor, they can target whoever they want with not much repercussion. I use this with a lot of caveats. Yeah. So in terms of tooling also, we normally go for open source or like self-developed or customized commercial tools. They are legal, whereas for them, they have a wide spread of choices to go after. So some of the key tasks I'll be talking about, so these are things that I'll be briefly talking about in terms of how Mandiant do certain things. Just how we do it. It's not the best or what, it's just how we do it to scale in terms of like managing about 200 consultants around the world. So I can't really share the internal tools that we build and use or what. So I will just mention some of the open source tools you can take reference from or build upon them. So for recruiting and onboarding, right? Okay, so this is the part that is a bit touchy, right? Because just now I keep flaming like all these like companies are having all these ridiculous requirements. And it's the same thing for us because basically client pay us for our time, and at least from a consultant perspective. And depending on market, some market tend to be a bit more stingy. Their budget is not a lot. So they cannot afford to pay for some like, you basically have like a 8 people in a team just to do one role at a time. Typically, like me, I'm basically their whole team, right? I'm the red team. One guy is the red team. So then how do we do it though within a reasonable scope and time and money? So then we need to hunt for people with diverse skill set. We are not expecting you to be like expert in everything, but you need to have a diverse skill set across the domain, right? Whether it's system administration, software engineering, security testing, reverse engineering, we look for at least 2 components and above. And this day and age, you really need to hire a dedicated developer with offensive security experience to support the operators running a red team. So for me, I'm the consultant that's running the operations. I'm on the ground, hands on keyboard in my client's network, but I do need the support of a backend developer to help me automate certain tools to develop stuff, because these days, even you buy commercial software like CoboShop, right? They are signature to death. Okay, they are signature to death, so there is a lot of customization, a lot of work involved to make them not so easily detected. And same for the open source tools out there. So in terms of onboarding, we do have our internal training. We conduct, once you join our team, we do an internal version of creative red teaming. It's also a course we offer externally. So what we do is we go through the whole attack kill cycle, and then we introduce you the internal tooling, all these things, so that all new consultants will be on board in terms of what's available, what's the normal process to go through, what offset things you should look out for. Of course, we have a lot of documentations, confluence, accidents, all this to refer to when you're doing operations. Because when you're in operation, you are very stressed. You are just like so many things you are trying to understand your client network. You're just parachute into the network, and then you try to find a way around it. And of course, we do shadowing. Junior consultant will be shadowing senior and above consultant to look at how they run their engagement and operations and how they eventually accomplish the objective. So in terms of running a red team, I think one of the core things that you need to really get it down is the infrastructure. The infrastructure enables you to do, actually dictates how you run your operation, because in terms of your C2, your phishing, all these things, you need servers. So it's actually important to actually automate most of this so that you don't make CD OPSEC mistakes. For example, if you are running Evil Jinx, you still have the header there. If you are running Goldfish, and then they still have their Goldfish header in the SMTP headers, it's not going to look good on you. And also in terms of C2 framework, you don't want it to be exposed to the internet, because there are like many security threat intelligence analysts scraping the internet for C2, exposed C2, and then they'll publish it on Twitter or X. And it's not a good site if you are being called out. So, and your clients will also question how are you securing your infrastructure? Because if your infrastructure is pawned, basically means that the adversary also have access to your client's network. So this is extremely important. So what we do is we automate most of it using Terraform and Ansible. I think one of my ex-colleagues put out some workshop that automates the deployment of a phishing server, C2 server, and I think a logging server or something, and then they are all put behind a Bastion host so that you have to go through a proper route to get there. And then for reconnaissance, what we have is we have our attack surface management tool. So what I do is I just run this tool, it's just put a domain, let it run. I don't really care, because to me it's just another data source. I just input the domain, it give me the result. And then I will also have another pipeline that we do our OSIM, where I can just keep feeding information to it and you'll keep running the task. So the key idea here is not to merely run the task and focus more on the analysis of the output. If there's any interesting thing that you want to pursue further, as compared to running AMS or what, why don't you just automate that and then just go through an iterative cycle? So I think I haven't used this tool before, but I heard good things about this Bbot, whereby it sounds exactly what I said, whereby you just put in the information, you go through the iterative cycle of this module, give you the output, and then you can feed it back in again to find more data. And for payload and tool development, these days and age is, I think I have to say that the security has been improving a lot in terms of the amount of solutions and all this, which helps our client be safer, which then also makes our job more difficult. So to even get through a decent or top tier EDR, you actually need to invest significant amount of time to research and develop payloads that work against them. Especially you are using commercial C2, which is heavily signatured. So you really need to pay attention to that. And I think one thing we try to avoid, right, is this cat and mouse game, right? Because every time I create, if I manage to get a payload working, and then my client first question is always, why does it work? I paid so much money for this EDR, and why can your payload still work? I mean, I would just say that, you know, we spend a lot of time try to understand how EDR works and try to get around them. And the next thing is they won't be happy with this result, right? They won't be happy with this answer. They will just send the payload to the vendor and say, how come this works? And then the vendor, like, because of optics issue, because of like business issue, they will be like pissed off, like, I have to do more work. Then they'll write some signature for my malware, and then I'm going back to drawing board again, right? So the point is, I do not want to get into this loop with them, and so I have to put in a bit more effort. So then we need to first understand how all this detection works. Most of it, even with AI and whatnot, it's mostly strings. So the question is, how can I randomize all the strings in my malware? And even if they have like, they look at control flow, they look at whatever AI behavior, the API calls and whatnot, how can I randomize that so that each payload I generate is different? So this is where you can come in. If you write your own payload generator, you can put it through a CI/CD pipeline or something. So each stage of the pipeline, you can basically insert random string. You can insert junk code at different point of the payload. You can change the sequence of things, but eventually it still functions the same. It looks different. Then you are less likely to get into this cat and mouse game until they really get pissed off and they sit down and reverse engine your payload and find some strings that you forget to change. Yeah. So then I will go back to then modify my generator, which is not too bad because I can just change a function. It's not that hard to change some code, right? And then I can then add more stuff into the payload. So it is always good to invest the time to do all this work so that during engagement, you don't have to manually go and craft a payload to bypass it because you're under time stress, you're trying to get objective, try to evade all these things. You don't want that. So anyway, I put in some reference that you can use as a baseline. Then from there, you can build out from there. And also, if you use .NET kind of post-expression tool, my ex-colleague actually shared a Azure pipeline that helps to automate the source code of those .NET projects. They'll go through, change a string, then run Confuser EX so that it looks different when you use it per engagement, so that even if they start detecting that, you just use another set of tools for next engagement. Phishing. So you have already done what I said, right? In terms of automating your infrastructure, there's a lot of work done. And also in terms of your OSIM part, you also go and script all the email address. That is also done. Easy game. And next is really the creating the phishing assets, right? You just think of this as a marketing campaign. First, you need the email, your target people that you want to send your audience to, the email address. And then you need an email template, your EDM, right? You need a template, which if you've done enough phishing, you have some template that you can reuse and make some small changes. The landing page also template so that you can reuse it. If not, then just chat GPT, just write me an email, write me a landing page that encourage people to be one company and click on the link. Something along the line, it will work. Then next is in terms of payload. If you've already done what I say in terms of payload generator, then you won't be stressed during the engagement to create the payload manually. And you don't want to do it when you're stressed because you can easily make mistakes, which happen a lot to me. And lastly, in terms of validating email address, if you have a tool, and for the common kind of SaaS services, then it also makes your life easier. If not, then you can do it manually also, depending on what is available from your target system. OPSEC is very challenging because in order to spread the OPSEC knowledge, which evolve like ever evolving and change every day, it's very hard to communicate that to 200 consultants worldwide. So I mean, we can do all this basic kind of training and sharing kind of stuff during our internal training and documentation, but how do you enforce that? How do you say this command is stupid? It will get you detected and burn away 3 weeks of our work that you work so hard to secure. So what you can do is if you use certain framework like Cobalt Strike, then they have an aggressor. There's an aggressor script that you can then kind of block the commands that you don't want your consultants or operator to run. So that's one way to do it, and make it a process, part of a process to load this aggressor script when you are doing operations. And next, you want to continuously, so if you also have like a centralized C2, then you can also build in your application framework or whatever you call it, and just blacklist all these commands and reminders to tell your operator what to do. So this is really the best way to scale up. If not, then it's very hard to enforce. Lastly, you want to continuously build tools to automate tedious TTP. So one example that I'll give can be quite contrived, but a lot of people like to talk about law bins, right? Leaving off the LAN binaries. They are bloody hell signature, so I almost never want to use them. But one way to make them still viable, depending on the client environment, depending how brittle their detection rules are, what you can do is, first thing, just rename the binary. Rename the binary and then see whether the detection rule still works, right? So, but if you were to, every time you run a login and then you need to manually rename the binary, it's quite a pain, right? And also, you also want to use obfuscated string kind of to evade their command line signature. So it would be best that if you can create a tool that automate this process, this 3-step process or what. And you might think 3-step is not a lot if you do it manually, but if you do it throughout the engagement, it's a lot of work, and it's very likely you'll make mistake. So it's very likely that you avoid this TTP altogether. So even if a very simple TTP, if you can automate the tedious part, it becomes viable once again. Reporting standard, if you've done enough red team, most of the stuff is very similar. So you can template most of the narrative sections and then customize those that is related to your client and the findings also. And I think one thing that is very helpful from my side is they have a dedicated team to perform non-technical QA. Basically, they just look for formatting, look for English, look for grammar, look for anything that's related to company like writing basically. So once we have already QA the technical part, they can just solve all the non-technical stuff, which is quite painful if you are not interested in that, right? So yeah, I think that's all I have. Any questions? Did I go on time? Yes, I'm on time. Yeah. Oh, got time. Oh, okay, question. If not, then I can bang already. Yes, go ahead.
Something that's being talked about. Thank you for your talk first.
Okay.
I was wondering if you have any comments on defending red team infrastructure.
Okay.
And approaches that maybe Mandiant is taking to do that. Because defense is just equally important for offensive operators, right?
Yeah. So definitely. So what I think the first thing we do is to make sure we reduce our attack surface so that we actually automate all the configuration of firewall rules. Make sure they come from trusted IP address, from our VPN, which has 2FA and all this stuff. And plus, we also have internal loggings for our infrastructure, I guess. Does that answer your question?
Do you gather telemetry, though, in your own infrastructure to detect whether or not you're being targeted?
Not really, because we reduce the access by Bastion hosts. Yeah. Any stuff? Any other questions? It's TGIF, I guess. Go home. Last chance? Oh, I can go and Slack already, I guess. Yes, go ahead.
So, about a decade ago, I implemented essentially like allow listing. So I think I was using Microsoft App Locker at the time.
Yeah.
So essentially, every application in the business, I'd actually like installed and basically profiled every DLL, every executable, everything. So either it was being done by signature or hashes. In that kind of a situation where it's like you're not even getting to the EDR point, right? In terms of like trying to evade it. What are you going to do?
Yeah, so this part is always, I have to say, is opportunistic. So I have clients who actually whitelist, loud list, whatever we call it, right? Most of the time, we will happen to find one login or one thing that will enable us to run our shell code. And then from there, once you are in memory, we are almost golden. We can continue to spawn things and operate in the memory. So that I think it really depends on how strict your whitelisting is. I have one case that we had a lot of pain, and we have to ask them to whitelist us eventually. There are also cases whereby we eventually find one that works, and then they patch it out, and then we are back to drawing board again. So it really depends on luck, I guess, and also how stringent and how far we can get from there. Yeah. Anything else? One more time. Okay. One more. Okay. One more to my weekend. Come on. Yes, yes. Okay, two more. I can go. Go, Sunny. Yeah.
Cheers. Because I know you've been doing this for a number of years, right? Are you finding that generating, say, like agents or shellcode and stuff like this is becoming more increasingly hard every time with EDRs as you're improving?
Short answer yes. Long answer depends on if you are using commercial framework that are commonly used. Yes. If you invest in the time to write your own C2, not really. Yeah, because you then get to customize it, and actually most of it is still boils down to string, whether string on disk, string in the memory. So it's really if you put in the work to go and change them up, then you get to survive a bit longer. And also depending on your activities that you perform after that. So there's a nuance to it. I won't want to say it's straightforward also, but it's also not impossible. Yes, but short answer, yes, it's definitely getting harder, it's better. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you got a question?
Kind of going back to the question I asked earlier, how do you guys ensure the integrity of the own custom tooling that you develop? If we go years back, Phineas Fisher, he popped hacking team and stole a lot of their offensive security tooling, and other entities have also been compromised in same or similar fashion. So what is your guys' approach for safeguarding your own tradecraft and ensuring you don't lose it?
I think there's no any difference from like your corporate security though. It's just how you secure data, right? You do the standard stuff, segmentation, least privilege, 2FA, your detection, telemetry, whatever, who access stuff, two-party request, approve, the kind of stuff, right? There's no any difference from stuff. And I guess from your perspective, it's also when we are operating on client's network, how do they get our tools? So in general, we mostly operate from the memory, so it doesn't matter. We don't really drop things unless necessary. So there's not much things to steal anyway. And even if you want, I won't be afraid to say most of our tooling is actually based on open source also. It's not like some very crazy kind of tradecraft. Because normally we can't do that also because some client will say, oh, this is not fair. No, this is not the real tractors are doing anyway. So is this a realistic simulation of tractors? So we actually rely a lot on public open source tools. I'm not afraid to admit that. But for certain things like C2 framework and whatnot, which we have to get a foothold in, then we invest a lot more time on it. Beyond that, a lot of stuff is based on open source tool. We make slight changes or we mix and match certain things to get past the detection, so that we want to remind the client that certain detection is very static. We want to make it a bit more dynamic to show you that it could be done. I hope it answers your question.
So you apply the same cybersecurity controls to an operator's network that you would apply to a business network without entering operations?
Because in order to the operator network, we have to go through the business network also. So yeah, there are certain assumptions there already, because we don't just like go behind the business in some ways. So all these things has to be vetted also. Yeah. I mean, you could do that if you really want, but if anything happens, then good luck on you. I mean, everyone can choose to spin out their shadow IT, and so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a very quick question. From C2, what is like a typical time to getting full demand event, as an example?
I think it really depends on the client though. It's very hard to say. I mean, you read some reports, you get it within 20 minutes. I mean, it's possible, but it really depends on the kind of a tractor you're simulating, right? Like for example, if I'm simulating a low and slow kind of actor within the first 2 weeks of the environment, then I will take my time to slowly run the command, slowly make sure that I know how certain things work before I try to elevate my privilege. If I'm going for a smash and grab, the shortest one I've done is less than 5 minutes. Corporal, straight away, 6-letter, clear text password, lowercase. It was so easy that I thought it's a canary account, but apparently not. So it really depends on what kind of tradecraft and tactics you are trying to do it. And also, I think the most important thing is how much the client is paying you. If they pay you more money, then you got more time, and you don't want to like just do it in a way that's very loud and you are more likely to be detected. You want to stay in the network as long as possible. So that might screw the matrix a bit. It's the same thing like, for example, last time people talk about, typical breach, the dwell time is much longer. Now the dwell time is much shorter because of ransomware. They want you to know as early as possible, whereby you talk about nation state, they want to be on network as long as possible without anyone knowing. So you really talk, depending on the threat actors that's in your network, and what do they want to achieve. Yeah, so if I'm the nation state, I will take my time as long as possible, stay on network and try to gather as much information as possible, because that's their point, right? For ransomware, I want to be as fast as possible before you get me out of the network. I already ransom you, and then I'll just write a blog about you to pressure you into paying me. Yeah, so it's whether you know what's happening. I guess that's the long story short version of the answer. Anything else? Yes, it's time for Friday.